Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. My name is Christian Pavarelli, as you may or may not know. And in this episode, we are going to be talking about NoCode. We're going to be talking about entrepreneurship. And we're here with Jeremy, who is actually the co-founder and CEO of Adalo, one of the most prominent no-code building tools out there. So I appreciate you joining the show, Jeremy. Thank you so much. How are you doing in these weird COVID times?
Yeah, happy to be here. Everything's been crazy, but business is good and Adalo is doing super well. So we're excited to see that continue and just hope to keep everybody happy.
I am as well. I'm super stoked for everything that you guys are building. So why don't you just kind of explain people in a couple of words sort of what Adalo is and what your focus is on, mainly in the no-code space.
Yeah, so Adalo is the kind of the preeminent, the leading mobile app builder for no-code tools. The main focus is to build apps as quickly as possible. We have a lot of templates available. We have a lot of the backend functionality built in, so you can just build an entire mobile app front to back inside of Adalo, launch it to the app stores on iOS and Android, and we're pretty much the only tool that lets you do all of that in one tool at the moment.
Yeah, that's amazing. And there's a clear sort of space there, right? You have, on one end, you have like companies like Webflow that are very good on the front end and CMS. Others like Bubble that are kind of on the web app side. And it's clear that there's this big gap happening when it comes to sort of the mobile and more specifically sort of native apps. So is that something that you like always had in mind when you started out this company? Like, how did it start? Like, what was the idea for this? Was it just like, I'm trying to build my own app? Or was it other people being like, hey, we need to build an app and developers are
Yeah, so it was kind of funny. I mean, I saw this rise of design prototyping tools, things like InVision and Figma and those tools that let people build prototypes really easily, test out ideas, get feedback, but then there was no way to take that and actually build a real app with it. So what I initially did is basically tried to take the approach that InVision was taking and import things from Sketch or Figma and then build on top of that. And just let you build an app with those assets. Then from there, we kind of built out the backend functionality with the database and all that. And we built a lot on top of that. We no longer really support the design imports because designers are not our primary audience, but that's something that's kind of how it originally came about, was from that angle. And no code, to be honest, wasn't really as big of a thing at that point as it is now. It was really just design tools was really hot. And then there were people talking about kind of like Bubble and other related platforms, that it wasn't really the no-code movement that it is now. I think over the past year and a half or so, it's really cemented the movement as being a thing that's here to stay. And obviously you guys are really building on that, but no, it's kind of grown in parallel with us, which is great because now it's fueling our growth, which is awesome.
Yeah, no, and I think that's like really important, right? It's like the fact that like now at least it's getting some attention. I think it got some attention probably 5 years ago. People were, had this big promise. The promise failed to, there wasn't good delivery on that promise at that time. The technology was not there yet. And it's great to see this sort of rise again happening. But I think that for a lot of us who have been in this space for a while now, either as builders or as founders, it's just exciting to see that this is kind of becoming mainstream. So did you see that Amazon released, their new product, NoCode, the other day?
Yeah, I saw that. And I saw that the first comment on TechCrunch, the most upvoted comment, said that they should have just bought us instead. It's pretty funny. I don't know. So, I think that it's definitely interesting. It adds a lot of legitimacy to the space. Just the fact that somebody like Amazon is building a tool here. I think their audience is a little different than ours because what they're building is basically something that's more like Airtable with a lot of extra functionality on top of it and the ability to actually build an app on top of it. But that's kind of a whole separate space of the more internal oriented tools, as opposed to we're very oriented around things that are customer facing, whether you're at a company or you're starting a startup, you're building an app that's going to face a customer. That's really what we're targeted towards and focused on.
Yeah, but I love your comment, and actually the comment you were talking about on the TechCrunch thing. It seems very clear to me, at least, that in this space, and I think really what it comes down to is a cloud play. It's like, how can we actually, grow our cloud? So AWS, you also have all the other major players are participating in this thing. And I think that,
I think ultimately no code is the new cloud, because
yeah,
if everybody's running stuff on no code, then we're going to be as big as the cloud providers that we're running on top of, and that's a risk to them, right? So they want to maintain the customer base of startups and enterprises that are using their services and not going through us first, because that's an extra layer they don't really want to be dealing with.
I posted a little link on LinkedIn, anyway. That was basically saying like, yeah, it's basically, I believe this is the beginning of the acquisition wars. I think that basically people are going to start, like all these companies have realized it. Google stopped their internal sort of no-code tool and bought AppSheet. You know, Amazon is now coming into the game. We know that Microsoft have had tools for a while internally. I think they're going to start sort of getting into the game. And I think that everyone who has this sort of interest on the cloud front, I mean, it makes so much sense. It's like, how can we sell the cloud solution without selling the cloud solution? And I think you said it right. The big risk for them is that basically you have companies like the no-code building tools that end up building their own backend infrastructure, not using their tools in the longer term. Of course, like, you know, like building infrastructure, you know, is incredibly complex to have that many sort of data centers all over the world, you know. So, but I think that, yeah, that's kind of the risk that they're running in the longer term, and they're seeing that, right?
Yeah, and I think that's similar to like Twilio's risk when Uber was their biggest customer. I think they were like 30% of their business, and then they built their own SMS provider, and all of a sudden Uber leaves Twilio, and Twilio's like missing 30% of their revenue 1 month. So obviously they don't want something like that, where, I mean, Dropbox is a similar example where they were, I think, fully based on AWS for a long time and then switched off. Their profit margins go way up, but AWS loses a lot of money out of it. I don't think that one was big enough to really hurt them, but at the same time, you know, it's not something they like to see, right?
Yeah, exactly. And in the end of the day, like they're fighting a bigger war. It's not a war about like, oh, is this no code tool going to start building their own infrastructure? It's more like, is this other larger company going to buy out that no code tool that has a prominent user base and is growing quickly, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's
definitely.
where I think that's, yeah.
We're definitely hoping we can stay as an independent company that grows for a while and becomes very large, but I think you will see a lot of activity in this space. And I've already, you know, we've been contacted by multiple of those companies already. I know Microsoft bought a company, I think in 2019, like early 2019, that was in the AI for like AI no code space, as in like you upload a bunch of training data and it gives you an AI out of the box, something like that. There's a couple of those that are.
Oh yeah, there's lots of exciting stuff with regard to that, like just cutting edge stuff that's starting to happen that you can plug into the no code through API. So let's transition into that. You know, first of all, before we, you know, I want to get you on the spot here, and I want to say, you know, when you sell your company, am I invited to your yacht parties? That's my biggest interest here, really.
Well, we've told all our investors that we're not planning to sell, we're planning to IPO, and we're gonna be here for the long term.
Love it.
But no, if that happens, IPO or sale, of course you're invited.
That's so funny. But I wanted to now transition into what we were just talking about, in terms of like the ability now to bring in these very sort of cutting edge technologies within the no code sphere. So you guys at Adalo provide this amazing way to build apps, and there are certain things that up until now have been more complicated technologies to integrate within those apps. Things like machine learning, AI, and others, like, you know, even blockchain. You guys are in the process of sort of releasing your marketplace for plugins, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Yeah. So the basic idea is now third-party developers are going to be able to build components that plug into Adalo and add whatever functionality people want them to. Basically, a lot of our existing components, things like buttons and tab bars and all those things, were already built as separate components, but now third-party developers will be able to build those. We already have, I think, 5 or 10 developers in the process of building some for our initial launch. And then if you want to be part of that, you know, we have the program available, so just contact us. And that's going to be launching hopefully sometime toward the end of July. We launched our beta yesterday, actually, so it's pretty recent, but we're just trying to make sure everything's running smoothly, get a couple of components in there for testing, and then we'll be rolling that out to the public. But the other part of that, so that's the component marketplace, and then also there's the other things we've already had that we're going to be adding to the marketplace probably over the next few months, which are external collections, that's pulling data in from other data sources, custom actions, which is basically pushing data out to data sources like sending emails or SMS messages or anything like that we don't have built into the platform. So kind of productizing those things. And then also templates, which we're going to be releasing over the next few weeks as well. So it's going to be a big month for Adalo, hopefully, but a lot of new stuff is rolling out.
No, it's just so exciting to see you guys move at such a quick pace. I know that you guys have been able to, up till now, sort of keep a relatively core team in place, and that you're also growing quite quickly. So probably looking to hire people moving forward. But yeah, how has that whole process been? Let's talk a little bit more now about like your entrepreneurial journey. I mean, like, is this the largest team that you've managed? How have you, how are you seeing this all unfold? I mean, it's very exciting for you and the team.
Yeah, it's been crazy. I think the other week I was on a stand-up call with everybody on the team, and it was 19 people on the call, which is the most I've ever, even imagined leading, managing, whatever. But when I first started the company, it was back in 2017, and I think September of 2017, by myself in my apartment in San Francisco, and just kind of saw this rise of design tools, wanted to take advantage of it and apply it to building actual apps, and basically started working on it by myself. And so for the first several months, it was just me working in my apartment. A little bit after that, joined an incubator program and got some help from them. But then later throughout that year, met my two co-founders, Ben and David, who are based in St. Louis, Missouri, and kind of have grown the team from there. So they initially started working with me, and I was still in San Francisco, and then I eventually moved out to St. Louis, and now I'm based in the Midwest. And a lot of our team is based here too. And we've grown the team from the three of us. I think our first actual full-time hire was last June, sometime early June of last year. And we had a couple interns then as well for last summer, one of whom returned this summer. So it's great to see that retention. But then we've hired several more people since then. So I think by the end of the year, it was maybe 5 or 6 people. And then we've hired several more this year after we raised a little bit of money. That allowed us to do that and just kind of grow the team to where we can meet our customers' needs. Yeah. Obviously, the biggest event that happened was last fall in November. We did our big launch event. So that kind of brought us from a very small number of paying customers to a much, much larger number now, and just a ton more free users as well. So we've had to have a team that can scale and support that and build all the features, but also handle customer support requests or do all the other things that are needed behind the scenes that aren't necessarily as visible.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I mean, like, that's something that people don't really talk that much about, right? It's like, there's this thing that like no one really tells founders early on. It's like, there is a huge difference before product market fit and after product market fit. And basically the current team that you have up until the point where you reach market fit is well adapted for that, right? It's like, okay, we're a tiny team, we're trying to figure stuff out. But then as soon as you reach product market fit and you're trying to really scale it out and you're really testing these different acquisition channels and looking to grow and scale, like basically half of the skills that the founders had are redundant, right? It's like, because you're jack of all trades and now you need specialists in certain areas. So, right. I think as founders, it's really interesting how you are pushed to kind of like develop different skills as that transition happens. So bring us through some of that. Like, what were some of the key things that you had to learn as you moved into sort of starting off as this kind of like, let's call it like a hacker, because that's kind of what all entrepreneurs are early on, running a bunch of tests. Yep. And then kind of like bringing it into something that had a bit more processes and where you were able to kind of execute and control a slightly larger team.
Yeah, I mean, so the first transition was just going from myself and one intern to me and Ben and David. So that was definitely a transition, but the much bigger one is, like you're saying, after we launched and we started hiring more people. The biggest thing is probably just, for me, it's been building out the scalable engineering team that people can actually do things on their own and answer their own questions. Because I think for a very long time, I've been kind of the single source of information for anything about the product since I was initially building it by myself, and I have a lot of that knowledge just in my head. So now we're trying to do things like have better documentation internally and have kind of better planning around how we develop features and explain them to the rest of the team and stuff. So that's been figuring that out. It's been really fun. I think on the other sides, Ben and David were both doing individual things like sales and customer support that they were just doing themselves, and now we're trying to make everything redundant so that if one of us goes on vacation or we're out sick, that's still happening. It's not completely missed.
I love that. It's
That's
like,
been
how can you scale your brain, right? How can you scale those skills and train people to do? Internally, what we do actually is we've been using Loom quite a bit. And every time that we have something that we have to teach either the other person or someone that we're handing it off to, we'll actually record a video. And we're starting to just come up with this database of really rough videos, right? But it allows you very quickly to be like, oh, okay, as soon as someone joins and this is their role, you can just shoot them a couple videos of different areas in which you've already kind of had to transmit that message. And I think
I like that. Maybe we should try it.
Yeah, you should totally try it. And Loom is totally free, so you can do that as well. The pro plan I think is like $5.
Yeah, we use that a lot for the internal like customer support stuff. So when Ashley, our newest customer support hire, finds a bug, she sends it over to the engineering team usually with a little Loom video that says like, "Hey, this is what we're running into. Check it out, guys."
Yeah. Basically, I think that we're entering a time where like documenting things is so important, and increasingly like people are just wanting to have short videos. And
I think it's partially driven by the fact that everybody's remote these days because we have an office, but everybody's been pretty much remote for the last 3 or 4 months now since whenever coronavirus started. So because of that, you need to document so many more things because you don't have the side conversations. You only have the main meetings or the main conversations with somebody, but not all these other explainer kinds of things.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I like that. So yeah, what kind of, let's now take a step back and talk about sort of no code as an industry, also known as visual programming. What are some of the things that you see happening in this industry, and where do you predict this is going? Let's say in the next 5 to 10 year range. I know that you guys released a really cool little what do you call it? I believe it was David who released a very cool like synthesis of like interviewing a bunch of people in the no code space. What were some of the learnings that you take away from that study?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody in that study really believes that no code is the future, and that's what we named the series "The Future is No Code" because that's what we all believe. But it seems like everybody we interviewed definitely agrees. We see lots of interesting different use cases, and we see that this thing is expanding faster than we could have possibly imagined. I think that when I started the company, I thought that it would be an uphill battle to get people to be interested and to convince people that there was a thing happening here. But now that's kind of taken off on its own, and we're just riding it as well as we can and providing answers to everybody's needs. It was great to see kind of a lot of people agree about that fundamental premise. Definitely there's disagreement about how long it's going to take to get to various points, but everybody sees that it's just moving super quickly.
Yeah. So is this something that's going to, one of the things that our company is basically like betting on is that, for 80% of the cases, this is going to replace coding schools. Do you think that's correct?
Yeah.
And if so, how long do you think that will take?
I mean, I think that coding schools were already in a really tough spot after COVID took off because now, I mean, no offense to any of the coding schools that are out there, because some of them are doing really great work, but the need for really junior engineers has kind of dried up because what no code allows you to do is basically build those first versions of your product or those slightly less technical products without needing any engineers. And then you only need engineers to build the integrations and the plugins and those kind of things that we're now, like the things we're just launching, things like that, basically let you build the really core difficult parts with code, but then everything else can just be assembled by a product manager or business analyst or somebody else who has that kind of, has the need rather than is a core product person. But I think, like you're saying, coding schools, basically we're delivering people at the bottom of the spectrum of the junior engineers. And what a lot of those people were doing is assembling React apps or doing HTML and CSS, and those kinds of things are things you can really easily just do with Webflow or Adalo now. So,
love it. Yeah, no, I think you're really right there. So you've gone through founding companies more than once. What are some of what's some good advice that you think that you've learned, or what are some of the hard lessons that you've had to learn that you think that people can avoid these days?
Yeah, I mean, I started another company when I was in college and took that one up through the seed round, and I was the CTO there rather than CEO. So it's been a little different in that regard. But I think the biggest thing that I have learned across both of them, and I had to kind of relearn this time somewhat because I worked in another company in between for a while, but it's kind of like just get off the ground and start something. And if you don't know the answer, figure it out, or try until you find it. Because I think a lot of times people get stuck in this rut of, I don't know the answer, I don't know who to ask, there's nobody telling me what to do, I'm not sure where to go from here. But the reality is, like, nobody's going to tell you what to do. I mean, Christian, you might be able to tell people a little bit clearer answers of like where you should be going, and that's great. But the reality is there's a lot of things that you're experiencing for the first time that maybe other people have experienced before, but probably not the exact combination that you're experiencing them in. So you just need to get really good at finding answers for yourself and just trying things that are uncertain and seeing what will happen. Because sure, if you launch on prototype before your product's 100% ready, maybe it won't go very well, but maybe it will go really well and you'll learn something, right? And that there's value in both of those. And so you got to just try it and see what happens. I think we took a long time to do a lot of things that honestly I didn't do because I didn't know. And when I talked to Ben and David, when I first met them, almost a year into running the company, and we had probably two customers, one paying customer at that point. It was super small numbers. There were a lot of questions of like, why haven't we done this yet? Why haven't we tried these things? And it was basically just like, well, I haven't had time, but also I didn't know what would happen, so I just didn't do them, right? And so I think one, surrounding yourself with other people who can help with a lot of those things is super helpful, but also just trying things and seeing what happens, because you don't really know. It could be a really positive result, but you're just afraid of it.
Yeah. So just like really testing these smaller things and seeing what the actual result is. And I agree with that.
I think like, the other thing I would say there too is it does take a lot of patience to start a company. I'm almost 3 years into this now, and we're definitely experiencing a lot of success now. But at the same time, I wouldn't have expected this to take this long. I knew that it was going to take me a while to get to the point where we have enough paying customers where I can pay my own salary now with the revenue from those customers, and well over that, right? But it took us a while to get here, and I thought that I was going to be working on this for 5 months and then I would be off to the races and profitable, and that's never the case. So you have to give yourself a little bit of time to make that stuff happen.
Yeah, it's like I think there's some of these kind of like Gary Vee and Tom Bilyeu say like be patient, but also be incredibly like not patient. Like
right.
Like execute incredibly quickly, but then in the longer term, like be patient, because things take some time to sort of grow. And I totally agree with that. I think that like that's maybe one of the fundamental problems. Like people think that there's this like quick button to like to quick success. And that's where I think a lot of people are being taken advantage of, frankly, online. People are selling them that dream of like, hey, you don't have to do anything and you're going to make a bunch of money. Here, give me some money and then you'll be off to the race. And I think that that's something that like we have to change in general in the mentality of entrepreneurs getting into this, especially these days.
I think definitely NoCode helps that somewhat. So I think NoCode delivers part of the promise of what they're promising, but you still have to build a product somebody likes, and that takes a while. And then you have to scale the operations of how to deliver that product to them, which takes a while. And in the case of NoCode, that helps with that second part a lot, because a lot of the products are just scalable out of the box, and you can launch them online if you're doing something purely digital. If you're doing like anything that requires any in-person interaction, you have to scale that part, and you can't do one without the other. So it's hard to get them all to scale up at the same rate. I think you can't hire 10 customer support people unless you're a millionaire without already having some revenue or some funding. And so you just can't be at that scale. And also, even just hiring and training those people is going to take some time, right? So it really does take this kind of like piece by piece. But I think what you're saying is correct. You don't want to be too patient that you're not actually making progress in a particular area, because at any given point, you should be pushing as hard as possible to get things moving. But even with doing that, it takes a while.
Yeah. So here's actually a question that I always kind of ask myself, how I can present this to founders. But there's definitely this idea of like in entrepreneurship, which I don't know how much I like it or don't like it. It hasn't been that useful for me. I think it depends on the person, but it's this idea of like, just keep on pushing, just keep grinding, just go, go, go. And I think that like a lot of the times it's like that kind of pushes people to just keep going when maybe they should be looking at things looking at the results in the face. Like, do you know what I'm talking about? Like there's really this attitude of like, you just got to keep going and then it'll work someday. Well, no, sometimes and oftentimes if you're going in the wrong direction, like you'll learn stuff, but it's not going to push your company in the right direction. Like what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think that definitely there's a lot of mentality around like, just if you just persist long enough, you'll eventually succeed, and that's the case it's the case if you figure something out that lets you succeed, but it's definitely not the case if you just keep pushing at the same thing and beating your head against the same wall. That's kind of the definition of insanity. If you keep trying the same things and they don't work, and you keep trying them again and they still don't work, then probably need to adjust something. I think that usually what is successful in those situations is you do something, you learn from it, you do something else slightly tweaked, you keep doing, you keep doing, you keep pushing, but usually you're not pushing on the same thing, you're pushing on slightly different versions of the same thing, you're iterating, you're learning as you go. And that's what actually lets you succeed in the end, is that you know a lot more than you knew at the beginning.
Yeah, I love that.
And that's the knowledge is really what lets you succeed, though.
Yeah, in the longer term. So do you have like kind of a, learning is clearly a very important part of entrepreneurship because you're constantly having to face new problems and to learn stuff. Do you have sort of like ways that you kind of encourage your own personal like continual learning? Is it like, oh, I'll take an hour a day and I'll like read a book, or like, like, do you have strategies that you use?
I mean, I definitely haven't been reading as much this month as I should. I was doing that during March and April. I was probably reading an hour or so every morning, just stuff about business, stuff about all kinds of random different topics. Lately, though, it's been very focused on more, I guess, job specific stuff. We've been running through, or we've had a lot of scale increase over the past 3 months. We've gone from, I think, probably an average of a couple thousand active users every month to now like 20 or 30,000 active users. So it's been a huge increase there. And as a result, we've had to scale out a lot of our backend infrastructure. And, myself being still somewhat involved in the engineering department, I've had to be doing a lot of learning about like how to scale engineering teams and how to scale engineering like deployment and all that stuff. So it's been much more like tactical there lately, but still kind of a lot of continual learning there. I think that you do have to make sure the thing you have to make sure you do is like, you can't get stuck in just executing and trying to figure it out, but not actually getting better. Like if you just keep trying to solve a problem, but you don't actually do any kind of learning in tangential related areas, then you might be just approaching it from a bad angle. And so if you actually do that kind of education aspect, I guess you're calling it, but if you just are reading things or watching YouTube videos or doing whatever else you're doing in related areas to what you're trying to do, then often you can discover easier ways to solve problems that aren't so taxing.
Yeah. And that comes back to what you said earlier about like, the definition of insanity is like basically doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. And I think that's like a powerful thing, because I think it really comes down to that. It's like, you'll have different results. Some things will surprise you on the kind of results that you'll get from them with minimal effort. Other things you'll put in huge amount of efforts and you're sure they'll work, and they just don't work the same way that you thought. So I think it's so important to kind of keep yourself in check. And that's what I say to people. It's like, look at results. Try to like take the emotions out of looking at hard results and being like, okay, this drove, let's say that you have a video, you're right? Like, and it's like, this drove X amount of views, whereas that drove the other, a different amount of views. And even though you expected one to have more views than the other, and that might be linked to a number of things, right? Keywords, it could be linked to anything. But to actually look at those and be like, yeah, actually, you know what? People liked this content better, maybe. It's just important, because then you can kind of like help to mimic those things, and love it.
Yeah, I think one thing that's hard, and we experienced a lot, is as your company evolves, things change. So I think about a year ago, we tried to launch a version of Adalo that was very targeted towards agencies and freelancers and would help them build apps for clients, get us customers, make them happy. Everybody wins. It's a great scenario, right? So we pushed really hard on onboarding a bunch of agencies. And because we had, previous to that, I guess I should explain, we were running essentially an internal agency where we had hired a full-time designer to use Adalo to build apps for people. And she was just spending every day, all day, building apps, got some pretty successful, launches, got some apps people were using quite a bit. But then so about a year ago, we tried to take that and actually go to agencies and be like, here, this is successful. We've shown that it's successful. Here's how you can use this to build apps for people. And that basically was just a complete flop. This past, or I guess about 2 months ago in early May, we launched the same program, and now it's pretty successful. But I think the things that have changed is the product has been iterated on. The audience is now much more, I guess, evolved, where now there's a lot of people who know what Adalo is already. We're a much more stable platform. We're a much more capable platform. We know a lot more features. So things change over time. And so sometimes you test one thing, it doesn't work. You then get discouraged and think nothing will work. But after you change a bunch more things, the premises start changing and things eventually work. But that's just learning wise, that's kind of the hardest thing.
That's super interesting, actually. Yeah, sometimes it's really just about timing, and it's not necessarily about the effort you're doing. It's about the timing, and that timing can have a lot of other variables that come in there. Wow, super interesting. Yep. Well, cool. Well, we're kind of reaching the end of this interview, but before we reach the end of this interview, I wanted to know, where can people find you if they want to reach out to you?
Yeah, I mean, so we're adalo.com, pretty easy, adalo.com, and then Adalo HQ on Twitter, and you can find me personally, just Jeremy Blalock on Twitter. But I'm not as active as some of the crazy Silicon Valley tech CEOs, but I'm on there occasionally.
Love it. And so, what is the influence that you want to have on the no-code space or the world in general with Adalo itself?
Yeah, I mean, I think that starting out with Adalo, really our approach was bringing a design lens to no-code, and nobody else has really been doing that at that point. I think now there's some companies that are doing a really good job, but really our focus has always been having extremely good UX and having a product that is built for the purpose of being as easy to use as possible. I think that that's what will make no-code succeed, and that's kind of what is driving this modern movement of no-code and the resurgence of it, like you're saying. We just want to make that as good as possible and continue to push there and solve those problems, and hopefully that'll ripple across the whole space.
Absolutely. I love that. I really, really love that. So, Jeremy, thank you so much for joining us today. I super appreciate your sort of sharing a lot of what you guys are doing at Adalo. I'm super excited. Also, thank you for providing our students at We Are No Code with this awesome discount so that they can get started for free. That's also very appreciated. We're excited to continue to partner with you guys and find deeper ways to do that. And again, for sharing your insights today for all the people who are watching. I know that they're very appreciative because we're definitely getting some good response from these. So thanks so much for joining me, and I hope I see you very soon.
Sounds good. See you soon.
Take care.